So to continue our military videos, we look at two pretty unique tanks. The M1 Abrams, which is pretty much seen in every single Michael Bay movie, and is on the front line of every heavy American assault. And we put it up against France's LECLERC tank and find out what the differences are. How's it going, everybody? What is going on? Welcome to FTD Facts. My name is Dave Wapple, and I am just really excited today to take two rather unique tanks and putting them together. Now, it's kind of a sequel video to our Leopard 2 versus our M1 Abrams video, and I just figured we're just going to keep throwing these two together because you guys really like these videos. Now, before I get in this video, I want to let you guys know about a little thing called Grammarly.com. You guys probably already know it. They are sponsoring this video. If you guys want to just get better on your own grammar, hey, I use it for my own videos to help. I mean, talking is different, but typing is very important. So be sure to check it down there in the description box below. But obviously do it at the end of the video because we got to talk about LECLERC and the M1 Abrams. Both amazing tanks. So let's begin looking at the LECLERC. Now, this was a major contender for many countries in its early development. It's been in service since 1993, but it's had a rather long development phase that began as far back as 1983, although some say it goes far as back as 1978. The LECLERC tank, however, was made to be a replacement for the AMX-30 battle tank. Now, this was a tank that entered service in 1960, and what some people don't know is that shortly before the LECLERC began production in 1980, France was working on a co-development deal with West Germany to build a tank. However, unfortunately, this fell through when France was like, nah, you know what? We want to go solo. We want to make our own tank. Rightfully so. Go France. One of the big problems, though, that the old AMX-30 had compared to its previous tanks was that it was lighter simply because the speed was a major key rather than armor during those times. But with the introduction of armor-piercing rounds and composite armor, it opened up a lot of new challenges for tank designers in the 70s. And as a matter of fact, did you know that when the LECLERC first rolled out, it was one of the most expensive tanks ever in the entire world? Now, obviously, that's changed over time, and I'll explain that as we go through the video. But before we do that, to give you an idea of how much it cost back then, in today's world, it would equate to roughly over $9 million, which is about $2 million more than an Abrams, and about 2 times more than your average T90. And as the year 1990 began, this tank had gone through trials, and it was the new tank for France. The M1 Abrams is also a very remarkable piece of machinery. Heck, it's been proven for many years. She began service in 1980, and she was the replacement for the good old-fashioned M60 Patton. Major development for this vehicle began when funds were given to the XM1 program in 1971 instead of 2 other tank programs. Now, what made this tank very unique compared to other tanks is it introduced Chobham armor, which is a very, very reinforced version of steel. It's tough. Which meant that old school steel would no longer be effective at all, and in today's world, if you were to use it, an anti-tank round would go through that steel like a blowtorch through butter. Interesting enough, though, that the French actually also refused the use of this armor on the LECLERC because they wanted to instead develop their own type of composite armor, which doesn't have a lot of details on it, unfortunately. Now, the LECLERC battle tank is made by the Nexter company. Originally, however, it was developed by GIAT, which eventually became Nexter. Side note, with GIAT, they had a really hard time in sales until the LECLERC proved to be a good battle tank. And even with the good sales, the LECLERC is only actually used by 2 countries, and that is the countries of France and the good old United Arab Emirates. As a matter of fact, both of these countries are very well balanced in the amount of tanks that they have. France has about 406 of these, plus 20 that are classified as recovery vehicles, where the UAE has 388 LECLERC tanks. However, 46 of them are classified as armored recovery vehicles as well. In total, there is approximately 862 of these LECLERC tanks that have been made in today's world, and it is unfortunate that not many other countries have had a major interest in it over the years. However, there have been a few countries like Qatar and Colombia that have shown interest, but nothing is official so far. The M1 Abrams, though, it is way different. They've got a lot of them. I mean, a lot. There is about 10,288 of these bad boys made, originally designed by Chrysler Defense, which is now General Dynamics Land Systems. A lot of them were built in the Lima tank plant in Lima, Ohio, and the very famous Detroit Arsenal tank plant in Warren, Michigan. This is actually a very cool and very important tank plant, just so you guys know. This is because it was the first major tank factory within the United States. Now, for operators, the M1 Abrams is in Australia, Egypt, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and yes, good old USA, which has actually most of them coming in at over 6,000. The countries of Greece, Peru, and Taiwan have also had interest in this tank, but however, they are waiting the US approval for some of these. Variants, probably one of my favorite things to talk about because there's just a lot of different cool little things that they've added to different types of tanks. The Clerk, you've got Series 1, which I sometimes call the Original. The Series 2 had some major upgrades in 2009. New thermal optics were added. The nuclear, biological, and chemical system added air conditioning, very nice. Frontal armor was also thickened as well on the turret. There was also the newer 221 series, which they had a lot of upgrades to the armor. For example, more titanium besides tungsten. On top of that, within the 221 series, there was also a new thermal viewfinder that was added with a laser range finder and a few other cool features, including targeting features like IFF. On top of that, there were other individual variants such as the Flak Panzer, which is basically your anti-aircraft variant. A couple of recovery tank versions were also made. The type of tank that the UAE has been modified to what they call tropicalized. It's got some specific gear that the government of the UAE wanted that they prefer. An example of this is a tank infantry phone and a different power pack, that sort of thing. There's also been a few proposed and canceled prototypes. The new LECLERC XLR is your newest version, set to come out in 2020, and it's said to have Scorpion-type camouflage, or so they say. Overall, however, the LECLERC has about 13 different variants, either in use or currently or were proposed at one point and are now canceled. The M1 Abrams, though, oh my god, it's got a lot of variants. I mean, it's a lot. Starting off, you have your basic M1, there's also the M1A1, the M1A2, and the M1A3 as the main variants. The M1A3 is the newest one in development. However, within these top variants, you also have sub-variants, which I'll include in the total shortly. Should actually be mentioned that the first M1 Abrams that came out, it actually didn't have the same type of barrel that it uses now. It used a 105mm barrel. This, of course, was changed for the M1A1 version, which it adapted the smoothbore barrel from the Leopard 2. The M1A2 has a more advanced and updated armor using second-generation version of the depleted uranium armor. Also, side note, depleted uranium armor was added on the M1A1 for the first time. And just so you know, depleted uranium armor is about 1.7 times more dense than steel, so it's very, very strong. The M1A2 basically had a uniform upgrade with this armor, and all M1A1s are now upgraded to this version. There, of course, were some prototypes for unmanned versions of this tank, also ones with a bigger barrel using 140mm. Interesting enough, though, the M1 Abrams never had an anti-air version ever made. This is probably due to the fact that America just simply didn't need this. They have a really good air superiority system, and by that I mean they have a lot of friggin' fighters. A lot. There was also bridge-making versions, breacher versions. However, there was no recovery version that was ever made and put into service, but there was at least one prototype made. In total, you have 32 versions at least of the M1 Abrams. I should also mention that the M1A2C, which is theoretically the SEP version 3, which stands for System Enhancement Package, is generally the most upgraded version, using third-generation depleted uranium armor and a lot of other bells and whistles. This particular tank began field testing in 2017, and it's set for field work in 2020. Specifications. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Did you know that the Abrams has 4 crew members, or it needs 4 crew members, whereas the LECLERC only has 3. Why is that? One major different factor is that the LECLERC was one of the only few westernized tanks to feature an auto loader, where the M1 Abrams was made to have a human load the shell. And speaking of guns, both the LECLERC and the Abrams use the 120 smoothbore gun. The LECLERC has about 40 rounds within it, whereas the Abrams has 42. The autoloader can make the LECLERC fire 12 rounds per minute, where a good loader in the Abrams can shoot at rumored about 15 rounds per minute. But of course, that is a very experienced person loading this particular type of tank. And let's be perfectly honest, rate of fire does not always matter when it comes to tanks. This is because the thing that really does count is what type of ammunition you're using, what type of shell you're using, and of course, how fast you can hit your target for the first time. I also want to mention when we look at these specifications, I'm looking at the generally more advanced versions of these tanks. For example, the LECLERC, I'm looking at the XX1, and for the M1 Abrams, I'm looking at the M1A2 SEP. And with that, when it comes to guns, the Abrams has 3 of them. It has 2 7.62 machine guns plus a 12.7mm gun, whereas the LECLERC only has 2 machine guns. One is a 7.62 and the other is a 12.7mm. Weight, however, the LECLERC is one of the lightest tanks in the modern world, coming in at 54 tons, whereas the Abrams is 63. In terms of length of hull, not including barrel, the LECLERC is smaller, coming in at 6.88 meters. The M1 Abrams is 7.92 meters. Width, however, the LECLERC is a little fatter at 3.71 meters, where the M1 Abrams is 3.7 meters. Height, however, the M1 Abrams was meant to be a very low-profile tank. With that, it comes in at 2.4 meters, and the LECLERC is slightly taller at 2.92 meters. Speed, of course, this is a heavily argued thing, but when it comes to the M1 Abrams, it's said it can go up to 68 kilometers per hour. With that, it has an effective range of approximately 625 kilometers. The LECLERC, however, can go up to 71 kilometers per hour, but has a range of only 550 kilometers. Now, as for price, I did say I would get into it. Remember how I said the LECLERC was one of the most expensive tanks at the time? Well, now it's not really. This is because the LECLERC in 2016 came at approximately a little over $4 million US, whereas the Abrams came in at $8.92 million for one tank. Keep in mind, that is all in US dollars. So there you go, guys. That is it. That is me looking at the differences between the LECLERC and the M1 Abrams. Hey, if you guys got any stuff that I missed, feel free to put it down there. But if you guys like this video, or if you guys want more military content, just give this video a big thumbs up so I know to do more. That being said, if you guys want more content and you guys got some cool suggestions of other things we can look at the differences between, feel free to leave it down there in the comment section below because I love listening to you. And while you're down there, guys, go check out Grammarly.com. You guys get your grammar on. You know, improve on your grammar. It's really beneficial. It's a free program. I love it. You guys will like it too. But other than that, feel free to look at our playlists that will be in the description box below and at the end of this video. Got some cool stuff that I think you guys will like. All military related. Anyways, I'm Dave Wapple. I'll see you later. Bye. Okay, so here are some of the playlists that I was telling you guys about, or just briefly mentioning it. Feel free to check them out. I think you guys will rather enjoy these. Other than that, just, hey, subscribe. It's your first time here, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.